Okay, everybody, we are back. To a degree, we are back. And moving on with these schools.
Is it possible for you to summarize the nature of Uranus in a few sentences? I find it difficult myself.
Well, okay. For me, Gisela's asked me to summarize the nature of Uranus in a few sentences. Of course, I can't do it. But I will just say that the ideas and archetypes which have to be expressed on the dense physical levels of the cosmic physical plane, are found on the cosmic ethers, which is ruled by Uranus. So, if we can align with those archetypes by using the Antakarana to touch the different cosmic pranas, which are Buddhi, Atma, monadic energy, and logoic energy, we can bring the energies of Uranus down through the Antakarana, through the white magical process, and reshape the conditioned world of Saturn in the dense physical body of the solar logos. Uranus has the new and better way from on high. The archetypes have to descend, and that's the purpose of white magic. You know, if you're working as a white magician, the soul gives you an idea, and you work to manifest it. This goes even farther. It's the higher triadal aspect of your nature, which sends the idea, and you try to manifest it not just for yourself, but for the larger system. So, the 10th order is a very high order. It's the peak of causal expression. We sometimes say, well, we've got a causal body. That causal body is containing that which the soul wants to see manifested. But now we're moving way beyond that, and we're thinking of the planet as a whole, and Uranus holds the key to the ultimate archetype. The ultimate archetype is Uranian in nature and relates to the logoic plane, where Leo veils, the sun veils Uranus hierarchically.
But to what degree is Uranus involved in uplifting of matter?
It is involved in the transmutation and uplifting of matter. So it purifies the vehicles, transmuting them so that when the higher archetype descends, it meets less and less resistance. And it changes the passive resistance of the Deva kingdom into something much more responsive. So it is involved in uplifting transmutation. But of course, these are deep issues. I think we just have to get used to touching the Uranian stream of energy. Just get experience with it. And it will be revolutionary, revolutionizing. And it will, yes, and also simply the Antakarana method, which we have been given, the bolt will descend according, the projection, I see the greatest light, or whatever word of power you use, there will be a return bolt from Uranus. And we may be totally illumined, shocked, recognition of new things may come, and then when those ideas descend, we want to figure out a way to embody them in the Saturnian world. And of course, we have to use Saturn's methods. In other words, we have to respect what the conditions actually are. Because we cannot ignore conditions and hope to bring the archetype in. We have to clearly assess what is the condition, and then use all of our resourcefulness to find a way to bring in a new pattern which Uranus represents. There's people doing this all the time now. They say that you can run cars on water. This is totally Uranian idea. And it is much resisted by the powers that be that don't want to see such cars emerge. They have to find a clever way using the third ray, which is also part of Uranus, to adapt it to the Saturnian conditioned world. Okay. Of course, it has to be inadequate, but it's something. Here is Earth, which we have meditated upon this morning, the school of magnetic response. Another name given to its pupils is the graduates of painful endeavor, or the adjudicators between the polar opposites. On Earth, we have a crucifixion situation going on, not only because our planetary logos is undergoing a type of fourth initiation, which really shows the different directions of the poles, but simply because we are the home of the old order energies interfacing with the new order energies. And all of us are caught between these. That's why we are tempted. We are tempted to go backwards. We're invited to go forwards. We have soul and personality. We have a solar life and a lunar life. None of us can escape this. Our goal is to have the moon fall in Scorpio. And to have Mercury hierarchically potent in Scorpio. Buddhic illumination rather than entrapment in vice. So maybe at the second initiation, the moon begins to fall in Scorpio. Maybe it's completely fallen away by the time we take the third initiation. It doesn't make any difference what our ray is. We are going to be torn between competing opposites. And, we have to find out how they are working in our life, particularly. A further hint to be taken in connection with the two names here above given is that its graduates are said to undergo examination upon the third subplane of the astral plane. This is to see whether we can get out of the Brahmic astral world. The lower five subplanes are Brahmic. The second subplane is Vishnu-ic, related to Vishnu. The first subplane is related to Shiva. We have to free up our imagination on the second subplane and our idealism, our emotional idealism, on the first subplane. So, or are we going to continue to desire what is found in the five lower subplanes on the astral plane, two of which we shouldn't even have anything to do with? What's kind of interesting? The third subplane, he does say something about the third subplane of the astral plane. He says, this is where you find the heaven of the average Christian, on the third subplane. And then he does say something also about the seventh subplane. Seventh is where you find the hell of the average Christian. And with that, we're not supposed to have anything to do. It's not even, that matter is not supposed to be part of our astral body, but it is for some people. As far as I can see what this examination is all about, the examination is to bring the astral body under the influence of love and not desire. And that, I think, happens very much at the second initiation, where three planets of love, three planets of love, which are Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune, are all working to bring love into the astral body, but are warring against Mars and Pluto. So there's more involved in this second initiation than may meet the eye, but I do think that by the time it is past, the consecrated creative imagination is in the possession of the probationary initiate. So after the test is passed, you have entered the stream, and the consecrated creative imagination is in the possession of the probationary initiate. Consecrated. Okay. And then I added some things this morning, a little bit about the purifying, releasing sorrow and purifying pain. Were you able to find ways in which you have been released through sorrow? Or has it just been a pain with no benefit to the psyche? Usually it's after the fact that the release is seen, not while we're detaching. Yes. Two really serious things were the opening to the wonderful expansions. And viewed with hindsight, they had been fabulous opportunity. But we have grasped the opportunities. But they were painful at the time. Okay, and how were these opportunities for expansion devastating, painful? Did it change the shape of your life? And oftentimes one's relationships. Okay. There are many detachments which seem to occur when a person begins to follow the spiritual path. Friends drop away, close relations drop away, things are no longer shared in quite the same way. And even in one's family, can happen. I remember writing to the Arcane School. Since you sent me the work, my whole life is turned upside down. Then someone there by the name of Lawrence said, "Oh, that's really good. I'm so happy for you." Yeah, it's not the answer you expect. One has to stand. Otherwise, one does not come to the place where one sees that it is worthwhile. One has to withstand the pain and learn from it on the burning ground. Want to become a fiery stone, right? Living stone, fiery stone. Dr. Livingstone, I presume? Okay. Well, I don't know. I'd have to study him somewhat. But it is an interesting name, isn't it? He was lost in the heart of Africa, but he was found by a certain Mr. Stanley. In what? In the desert, was it? I thought it was the jungle. And then, after all that long search, Dr. Livingstone, I presume? It might have singled him out as the probable Dr. Livingstone. Okay, but then this is, of course, we should say, the School of Living Stones. We should put that in, of course, which I think has to do with the power of the jewel in the lotus, which becomes a living center of spiritual energy at a certain point of unfoldment. This is very interesting when one thinks about the mineral kingdom. Being a living stone or being a stone is different. Is there something in relation to the cosmic planes? We talked about how the army of the voice is effective on the etheric planes, but then again on the cosmic etheric planes, and the master, the Chohan. Master the Chohan are the living stones, and we are simply stones. Yes, to a certain extent, the monad itself is a jewel in the crown of the planetary logos. So the monad lives, and one wonders then about the monadic nature of this name, living stone. Are the jewels themselves? Do they have relationships to the Devas transmitting the prana? Okay, well, that's hard to know, but I suppose there are stones of all different kinds, and they have different colors, and at a certain point the monadic color is shining through the jewel in the lotus. The salvation of what? The plan of salvation is undertaken via the mineral kingdom, because this is the cosmic physical plane, so we are only mineral in a way in relation to the cosmic physical plane from the perspective of the solar logos. Okay, those are the big factors. Yes, I did a little research on this, and it did seem that the true jewel begins on the monadic plane, and what we call the jewel in the lotus is simply a reflection of that. And then, of course, if it was ray 3, it would be like an emerald, or ray 2 would be like a sapphire, or maybe ray 1 a diamond, or ray 6 a ruby, and so forth. So probably those higher forms of gem types would be found in relation to the crown of the planetary logos. And there would be a number of groups. There would be 7 different groups of jewels in the crown, all of them being like one large jewel with many different facets. So probably there are a lot of very literal things that happen on these higher planes. We would think that's very concrete, and yet it may simply be the case that it is so. Here is Vulcan, the school for fiery stones. There is a curious connection between the human units who pass through its halls and the mineral kingdom. The the rays of Vulcan, certainly ray 1 and 4. Ray 1 begins from below and indicates the mineral kingdom, and ray 4, beginning with humanity, counting down, 1, 2, 3, 4, indicates the mineral kingdom as well. And there's something very ray 5 going on in Vulcan as well, because it can handle these scientific connections with the mineral kingdom. And something rhythmic, 7th ray as well, because the hammer beats out a rhythmic response. I suspect it's the 4th ray, eventually turning into the 2nd ray, which connects it to the heart of the sun. Because DK does tell us that Vulcan is closely, he says, Vulcan, the heart of the sun. Yeah, yes, yes. The higher rays are probably, something in the personality. We cannot separate the idea of Vulcan from rhythm. It's the beating of the rhythmic beating by the soul of the personality into shape. The human units on the Earth scheme are called in mystical parlance the living stones, and on Vulcan they are called the fiery stones. Well, we'd have to discriminate. What's the difference between a living stone and a fiery stone? Vulcan is, after all, a sacred planet, and its humanity is more advanced, and it's always connected with the element of fire. So living is a certain phase of animation, and fire is something even higher, I suspect, connected with cosmic fire. And I suppose electric fire, solar fire, fire by friction, all of those fires we can find Vulcan connected to via the first ray, the second ray. Yeah, it's really interesting. When you look at Vulcan, you wouldn't expect heart of the sun. But heart of the sun is the solar logoic, egoic body on the higher cosmic mental plane. So Vulcan has to be found there, working there. He does not tell us exactly how that happens. So anyway, the condition of living stone seems a little bit less intense than fiery stone, but I do think that we learn how to be a living stone by consulting the fiery stones. The Vulcan does give our planetary logo some impetus towards the livingness of the stone. Inspired. Fiery stone are more inspired, inspired. Well, the planet is more developed, and the power of the central jewel is probably more fierce in a fiery stone than in a living stone. What about Vulcan and Leo? The implication is that the sun is veiling Jupiter on the personal level of Leo. There is kind of an implication there. He discusses that. But there are places where the sun, we have the sun veiling Vulcan and Mercury in some of the decanates. This happens in Pisces, it happens in Capricorn. The radiance of Vulcan is pretty extreme, but the radiance of the sun more so. So both Mercury and then Vulcan drop away and the radiance of the sun remains. There is some sort of fiery envelope which Vulcan provides for the sun. You know, to think of it as, an old friend of mine used to say, well, Vulcan, love can. He just turned it around, you know. And he found the second ray attitude towards that. But usually Vulcan is considered such a hard, willful planet. That's because we haven't yet touched its absolute essence. And maybe for some of the sacred planets we do not do that yet. They do have active monadic rays, but the soul rays are still much more important. Even for the synthesizing planets, the soul rays are more important. I think so. The monad would be the fourth, leading to the second. Ultimately, because it's the heart of the sun. And then maybe its personality ray, you know, ray 5, somehow technical, you know, involved with matter. Physical ray, ray 7. I'm not exactly sure about its astral ray, ray 1. You know, it's difficult to say exactly. Okay. See, how are we doing there? I hear sounds. Okay. So anyway, there's an intensity found in Vulcan. It's very fierce burning. And you know, you look at Vulcanian manifestations, they are eruptions. And they get everything out of the way. Where you know, I wonder what the condition of Vulcan is in the horoscope of Iceland. It would be interesting with so much volcanic activity. Yes. Isn't there a connection between Pluto and Vulcan? Yes, especially at the first initiation, but also at the second and third initiations as well. In other words, it's like the top of the head and the base of the spine, the Pluto-Vulcan connection, with Vulcan ruling the top of the head and Pluto the base of the spine. What does he say, you know, page 70 of the astrology book? He basically says, he say? Okay, at the first initiation, the disciple has to contend with the crystallizing and destroying forces of Vulcan and Pluto. So Vulcan is the crystallizing force and Pluto the destroying force. The influence of Vulcan reaches to the very depths of his nature, whilst Pluto drags to the surface and destroys all that hinders in these lower regions. So Vulcan is like the inverted arrow. The arrow flying into matter, and Pluto, as DK has given to us, is the upward pointing arrow of death. And where they meet, this comes the moment of crisis in initiation for people. And I think it's found in the second degree too, because you have to put the astral body to death. Pluto is good at that, but you have to begin invoking the spiritual will. And we find Vulcan very good for that at the second degree, because the difference between will and desire is very strong. So Vulcan, Mars, and Pluto are found there, as well as the more second-rate planets like Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune. When we look at the fourth initiation, Vulcan and Pluto are active again, because you have the death given by Pluto, and you are utterly alone and bereft of all counsel and advice, as it were between a rock and a hard place under Vulcan. So the angel of Capricorn, probably under Vulcan, comes to the Christ, and we have an issue of will, not my will, but thine be done. We can also see the two of them related to the third initiation, because Vulcan is the blinding brilliance of light, which is a first-ray light entering at that time, not just a gentle illumination, but a blinding light, as happened in the case of St. Paul, who was a very first-rate type. And then all the nether worlds which have to be illumined are ruled by Pluto. Everything is dragged up to the mountain top where it can be fully seen. We can even, if we like, apply Vulcan and Pluto to the fifth initiation, because this is an initiation in which the highest head center and the base of the spine come into a final relationship. Now, in other words, the base of the spine center is extremely important at that point, and that can be considered to be Pluto from one point of view, and the head center of purpose, or the 7 head centers, can be considered Vulcan. So it's purpose on top and will on the bottom. So there we see that all the 5 initiations involve, in one way or another, Vulcan and Pluto, but the only one that DK really talks about is the very first initiation. Let's just say that not all that blinds and hinders can be possibly banished at the first initiation. There's still a lot of stuff remaining. Especially, you know, the second initiation is very psychological, so you really do start plumbing the depths of your psyche, and Pluto is very good to help with that. Plus, of course, the steadfast will. In other words, it's Cain and Abel. Like I said before, Cain is Vulcan, and Abel is the shepherd, is Mars, is Mars, and Cain kills Abel. So at the second initiation, finally, we have the preeminence of will over selfish desire. Okay. So fiery stones. Well, I think Vulcan is one of those planets that's going to become more and more powerful as the years go by, and as we discover the nature of divine will or spiritual will, about which DK says we know nothing. So we have a lot to discover. I was with a guy, I told you, at the conference, and he says, "Oh, I can find Vulcan in your chart. Just add 15 degrees repeatedly to the moon or subtract it, and then get within the range of your sun and let it never be more than 10 degrees." So, whether he's right or wrong, I don't know, but he is the guy who has thought more about Vulcan than anyone I know and has written on this subject. So if you're interested in his method of deriving Vulcan, he takes quite literally the idea that Vulcan is veiled by the moon. No, you start with the moon's position and keep on adding 15 degrees or subtracting 15 degrees until you get in the vicinity of the sun, and stop when you're under 10 degrees. Because he says that the moon veils Vulcan, literally. He says that's what works. That's all he said. Well, he did everybody at the conference. Oh, he's done many people. He has 30 years on Vulcan. Oh, I don't know. He has written the most authoritative book on Vulcan, David Walters. So you can write to him. I have his number, and you can say, why 15 degrees? It would be, look, you see, the fact that we cannot find it shows us somehow that we're not quite ready for spiritual will to emerge as a major factor in our lives. Neptune's discovery was timely, so was Uranus's, so was Pluto. Vulcan is next. There's some objects going around the sun. Yes? Some objects going around the sun. Very there. I don't know, probably Vulcan has been photographed. Pluto was photographed in 1915, and nobody knew what it was. Until 1930, they figured it out. '15? So did you use the 15-degree method? Okay, well, Nicholas was there, and I don't know how he responded to it, but maybe he shared that method with you. Obviously, when your moon is very close to the degree of your sun, no matter what sign it's in, then Vulcan will be very close to your sun. In other words, basically you're adding or subtracting 30, but you're doing it in 15-degree increments. So, if you have a moon, let's say your moon is 27 Scorpio, and your sun is 28 degrees of Capricorn. So you subtract 15, or add 15, 15, 15, 15, and you get 27 degrees of Capricorn for your Vulcan position. Now, look, I take this with a complete grain of salt, except for the person from whom it comes, who has done all kinds of research in this area. And he does, it says it's hidden behind Mercury and hidden behind the planet, and the moon veils Vulcan. And he literally, he takes that literally. Of course, you never know with DK whether he's giving you a literal instruction or something symbolic. And then he says, okay, here's how you find out. When you have potent aspects, like Pluto aspects, to the vicinity of the sun, and something really dramatic happens, but not when it's opposite or square the sun, but when it's opposite or square the neighborhood of the sun. This can be a Vulcan contact, he says. Sure. Yeah, in other words, close aspects tend to be a conjunction. Exactly. Okay, but we don't know. We just have to see. You write him and see what he says. I'll give you his Okay, see if I can find it. You know, like, David, please give me my Vulcan. Oh, thank you. Okay, so it's D.G. Walters. Oh, okay, I don't know why this is taking so long, but does seem to be taking... Oh, that's CNN. I don't want that. Did they find this guy Mladic? They found him. Uh-huh. He was pretty heavy. Okay, so this is Walters. No, this is David. David. There must be a way. I know there's a way. Always do it now. Don't wait till later, because it won't get done. I can find him in another place. And those of you who are on the webinar, you can write to David and see what his understanding of why 15 degrees seems to work and how it shows that it works. Okay, so let's just see. Okay, Walters. Well, he says 10 degrees, but or 9 degrees, and some people say 8, and some people... David Walters, this is it here. Okay, D.G. Walters 45220. 5220 at yahoo.com. At yahoo.com. Okay, so let's see if I can... That's it. Okay, I'll make it big so everyone can see it. He's the one who's done the most research. David Walters. He showed up very unexpectedly at conference, always intent on doing people's Vulcans. But by next year, he'll know exactly. So if you don't come there next year, you won't receive your final Vulcan. But don't worry, even though it's nice to hold people in the big room, the timing of lunch somehow prevails. And everybody does go out at 12:30 to eat, whether I'm talking or not. The square is overcome. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, it seems far away, but you could, of course, be living in New Zealand or Australia. And I don't know, pretty soon with the condition of the U.S. dollar, it may be cheap to go to such a conference. We can always hope, right? Pretty soon they'll be paying you to go. Okay, the intense experience of the fiery jewel in the lotus, and obviously also a connection with the monad. Vulcan definitely connects with the monad. Okay. But in terms of knowing exactly what is the difference between a living stone and a fiery stone, I suggest you put your hand on your jewel in the lotus and see if you can feel the difference. But definitely alive. Here's what Vulcan does. Vulcan releases the inherent radiance of matter. So, although matter seems pretty opaque, by the time Vulcan works upon it, it starts to blaze. So I suppose under the influence of... I think the jewel in the lotus for Vulcanian types some of whom are here among us, may be a fiery stone rather than a living stone. They are among what you call the primary lotuses, and they came in to learn the love energy. They learned to unfold the second petal of the egoic lotus, but they came in with petals unfolded, first and third petal unfolded. So that means they also have a central fire in their in the heart of their egoic lotus, and there will be a difference in the kind of fire they have from the kind of fire we have. Well, he says the selfish scientific types that right now do not work constructively, and they build weaponry and all other kinds of things, will eventually, under the influence of the opening second petal, bring in a wonderful age, because they will be motivated more by love. So we better hope that they learn how to do that quickly, because right now they're certainly competing with each other to build better weapons. Yeah, the whole armaments industry is incredibly Vulcanian. It's not exactly about education, is it? No. Okay. Now, Jupiter. Okay, here's Jupiter. The school of beneficent magicians. Now, this is not just magicians of the 10th order. What is beneficence? What is it to be beneficent? The what? Okay. Useful. Of a benefit. Yes. Kind, beneficial, helpful, seeking the good for others actively. So this is white magic, which is interested in expanding the consciousness of others, not just trapping them like some volatile essence. The Black Lodge has its own alchemical methods, and some of them are pretty spooky. They kind of contribute to the disintegration of your vehicles, and just as your volatile essence is flying out, they put it in a jar, so to speak. They trap it. Then you are the slave. You're the genie in the bottle. So we have much to learn before we begin to play with fire. This planet is sometimes called, in the parlance of the schools, the College of Quadruple Force Units, for its members wield 4 kinds of force in constructive magical work. It's not about destructiveness at all, because it's a second-ray, seventh-ray planet. And if you look at the glyph of Jupiter, there's very much of the number 4 in it, isn't there? It's like a 2 plus a cross, but, you know, in another sense, it shows the number 4. And in a way, its exaltation in Cancer points to an important relationship. It is exalted in the 4th sign, Cancer, and it fulfills all 4 levels. So, in all lower vehicles, it brings fulfillment. The 3 and the 1, which is the integrating personality. So quadruple force units, but on the other hand, I think that we have to look at the 4 higher ethers as well. And perhaps Jupiter brings the energies of the 4 higher ethers into the 4-fold personality. Yes, to a degree, but it's a different approach. It's constructive. It builds the vehicles. It's a constructive um, second ray, geometrical, fulfilling, building, electric, imposing, galvanizing, shocking, shattering, all that. In other words, Uranus, get out of the way. It's a first ray, and Jupiter has this second ray, more leisurely, constructive method of fulfillment. In other words, there are three types of will along the first ray line. Well, maybe just three types of will. There's the will to create, Aries, will to fulfillment, Leo, and the will which conquers death, Capricorn. And it's obvious what aspect of the will Jupiter is involved with. The fulfillment particularly works in the area of consciousness. In other words, let's just say Jupiter expands the consciousness within every vehicle. It is a full glory and riches. When you see an opulent place, no expense has been spared to make it shine, attractive, make it look gorgeous, filled with all kinds of things of high value. There was the Yogananda story, and who was the man? He was one of Yogananda's teachers. He had one wish left, which was getting in the way of his advancement, so Babaji made him a nighttime castle, which was gorgeous. And he got to spend all night in this opulent castle and prove it was nothing, and then was free to move on. But in other words, the idea of shining gorgeousness comes into it. No expense is spared. The graduates work with the law of supply. So suppose you're missing something. Jupiter supplies it. So if you do not have something you need, then Jupiter provides it, therefore related to providence. God will provide. THR. THR. How do you say that? TRF, therefore. I can't do it. All right. So no wonder we like Jupiter, because when something is missing in our system, the source of supply is as near as Jupiter is, and as long as it's in line with wisdom, it is provided. So when Emerson wrote about something called the law of compensation, something bad has happened to you, something's been taken away, you've sacrificed, it has not even necessarily been your fault, but a sacrifice has come, then Jupiter provides the compensation to reward the sacrifice. Sower. A sower is one who scatters seed and promotes the growth of that seed. Visions and vision ideas, yes, that kind of thing. You know how Jupiter in mythology was always running around to the various promiscuous, sowing seed, but that's on the lowest level. He was always investing his nature in others. And his wife didn't like it. So his wife would, send poison robes and things like that to some of his girlfriends. But Jupiter got around sowing. is the one and needs to infuse all souls. So Jupiter has to be inside everything. And also, with much going, what happens? There is abundance. So the abundant life is found here. What is sown grows. This, in the case of the creative hierarchies, works mostly with Virgo, and it's the fulfillment of the Christ principle in matter, the final fulfillment of Christ consciousness in that normally inhospitable place called Virgo, when you're normally thinking of Jupiter's nature and what it can mean normally. But eventually, there is the complete consciousness, complete Christ consciousness in matter. So let's see if there's anything else here that is of interest. Palace of opulence. Well, you know, in a way, there is much about completion and perfection. And fulfillment of the archetype. Let's just say that Uranus may plant it or impress it, but Jupiter allows it to flourish under nurturing conditions. So it has a constructive side to it. When you think about the monad, you see the three types of spirit. Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. You think Jupiter takes the part of the third ray? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. You know, there's a section in Cosmic Fire where he deals specifically with this issue, yeah. And well, he asked us to do it. He didn't really give it. In this particular case, it was one planet, Jupiter and Venus, in which case Jupiter took the second aspect, Venus the third, or mind aspect. And then sometimes Saturn. When you look at the three gods, Uranus, Jupiter, and Saturn. Gaia is fed up. Okay. Well, I don't know. Jupiter is not a very ray 3 kind of planet, but I can see your reasoning. Yeah. The monad is the one which has three aspects. And after all, Jupiter may be a ray 2 soul, but Nicholas and I have both felt that the first and seventh ray are involved in a deeper way in Jupiter. He does, after all, hurl lightning bolts, doesn't he? Not a very ray 2 thing to do. Right. Well, in terms of their lineage, Uranus comes first, Saturn comes next, and then Pluto, Neptune, and Jupiter are all brothers of each other and sons of Saturn. Yes, because he rules the heavens. Neptune rules the waters, and Pluto rules the underworld. But you know what? When he allowed death to become overwhelming, because he wouldn't give back his kidnapped daughter of Ceres, his realm became too crowded. So then he had to strike a bargain with Ceres to give back the daughter half the year and to keep her half the year. So this is the story of timeshare. It's one of the original timeshares. It's a Saturn. It's kind of a spring summer versus winter fall situation. Pluto, just being an isolationist, doesn't like a crowded realm, so things have to be kept in balance. Mercury. It's always, is there something in the sequence? Well, I actually began to say something about that in my, well, what now comes Mercury. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a question. It's a question. Well, I think Vulcan has to come in relation to the Earth, because there's a similarity between living stones and fiery stones. And then Jupiter has its, I think what has happened here is that Earth has a first-ray monad, and so does Uranus. And then comes Vulcan, which has fiery stones compared to Earth's living stones. It's not necessarily an order of distance from the sun. Then we've had already one type of magician, and we have Jupiter as the other type. Not necessarily. It has a second-ray soul. See, and of course, what we're most interested in a way, is the soul nature of these planets during the laws of the schools, the law of love and light. But it does, but Jupiter is a magician, because on a very high level it has a seventh ray. It might. Ray 7-1. Ray 7-1. The king of the gods. Well, he throws lightning bolts and is the king of the gods. So it could be that he has hey, so do some of these first-rate potentates. I mean, you always look at these big kings, and they've got 3 wives and 250 concubines or more. They're on the first ray. So just because that's very much like the first ray in a certain sense. Well, you see, the assumption here is that this order necessarily tells us something. I think that the order is the opportunity to list another type of magic in relation to Uranus, just the way Vulcan and Earth are a pair, and Earth and Uranus are a pair. So then we have the first ray soul Vulcan, the second ray soul Jupiter, but there it breaks down. See, so I don't think that the code here is obvious in any sense. No, it's not. Of course, here's, in a way, ray 4, Mercury, soul. Ray 5, Venus, soul. Ray 6, Mars, personality, probably. Neptune, ray 6, personality, from a soul, with ray 2, monad. And I think that's all. What are we leaving out? I think we're leaving out Saturn and Anything else we're leaving out? Yes, at the time of this book was written, there was no Pluto. So I suppose, DK, that's a very good question. Perhaps because it has a remedial function. You know, there's a brown spot on Saturn, which is where all the bad guys go. That's what Master Moria says. There's a brown spot. Is there what? Yes, but it also has a punishment aspect to it. You see, we just don't know why he's left that out. The only thing I can think of, he gives us Mars. He gives us Earth. If he gave us Saturn, he would give us all schools for one of the triple beings. Now, has he done that for the second ray being? Jupiter, Venus, Uranus? Yes, he has. Has he done that for the first ray being? Not really, because Pluto would have to be included. And he's given us Neptune and Vulcan. But he's left one out. There must be a reason why he wants to leave Saturn. It's somehow too concrete or too specific. I suggest writing to him via the email. Yes, it's masterdk@gmail.com. Well, everybody's learning something, even if it's learning how to work. Notice what he says about Mars, the school for warriors, the school for destroyers, you know, so there's plenty that's not on the second ray there. And that suggests to me the first ray soul, potentially, of Mars. Well, I think that we should continue with this. Obviously, much more is implied than is completely said. But some revelation of the nature of the planets is coming through, and some little hints as to their type of teaching is being revealed. So after lunch, we will begin with Mercury, and then finish this section. So far, are you happy to go to school on Earth, or are you attracted to someplace else where you would like to go? You just get to build big castles. They're all opulent, more than you ever need, right? And you have a complete touching of all supply. Yes, lots of smiles. But of course, the Jupiterians are very heavy. They tend to put on a lot of weight. I mean, they just get everything. They just get everything they want, you know. That's right. Widening, you know, widening. Yes, they roll. They begin rolling after a while. You kind of wonder whether that second root race that used to roll around heaven all day was under Jupiter. We have, what do we have? The Adamic race, and then the Hyperborean rollers, high rollers. Smiling Buddhas, especially the Chinese Buddhas, are very much under this. Well, you know, the nice thing is that we realize that we're not alone, and that our particular type of life is only one of many types, and that very essential things within the solar system are being undertaken in other places, and that we can touch a certain amount of that process through our planetary aspects and positions, and, you know, angular positions, and maybe receive something of the teaching, because in a way everything affects everything else. All right, that's it. now you can go eat some more. You know how it is. We will live to eat again. Okay, webinarians. A little humor has to enter into this because the subject is just quite difficult, actually. Not everything is told and much is veiled. But a few little hints are there, and they give us the chance to see the nature of the law of the schools, the method by which the probationary disciple can begin to be instructed, and even the master, and even, in a way, the planetary logos. So it's a fairly mystical language, but we can find interpretations that seem to relate to aspects of the planets that we may hardly have suspected. Like pretty soon we're going to be reading about Venus, and we're going to see that it has 5 strict grades. 5 strict grades. Probably we don't think about Venus as being strict in that way, but we certainly might think about Sirius, its representative, as being strict in that way. So let us move forward. We'll be back at 12 o'clock GMT.